First things first, I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea with this video. I love Mario Maker 2. I think it's a great game. I've really enjoyed my time playing it so far. The game itself is a fundamental improvement upon the original Super Mario Maker, with it including so many of the highly requested features from the original game being added in, such as multiplayer, the inclusion of a brand new game theme being Super Mario 3D World, the inclusion of many new enemies and level types. There's a ton of new stuff to play around with here. And I believe that as the community grows and develops and more levels get posted online, the enjoyment of the game is only going to grow further. However, despite my enjoyment for Mario Maker 2, there's a lot about the game that makes me wonder if it was potentially rushed by Nintendo to meet a certain deadline. It's what I'm going to be examining today within this video. Was there internal pressure within Nintendo to rush out the release of Mario Maker 2? Now you may be thinking, well, if you enjoy this game so much, why would you think it's so rushed? Well, the fact of the matter is, for me, it's a great game, but it potentially could have been even better, and I'm going to be going over many examples of this within this video, and after I go over the examples, I'm going to list some potential reasons for why Nintendo would want to rush out the release of Mario Maker. This video is just a theory, and it may not be entirely true, but I do believe there's lots of big evidence here that could support this idea. Again, and I really want to stress this because I don't want you guys getting the wrong idea about this, I'm not trying to attack Mario Maker 2, or any of the fans of that game. I'm one of them. I was a huge fan of the original Mario Maker. I'm really enjoying the second one so far, and I'm sure it's going to grow even more. But I do want to go over some potential reasons for why it could have been a rushed release. If you're new here and end up enjoying this video, consider subscribing and ticking the bell icon so that you do not miss any more Mario Maker 2 content that's on the way very soon. Now with that being said, let's get started. I'm going to begin this video by going over several points of evidence for why Mario Maker 2 may have been rushed. The first aspect that I want to touch on is that there was no online with friends at launch. The online multiplayer, as I previously mentioned, is a great new feature being added into Mario Maker 2, but it seemed weird to know that online with friends wasn't going to be in Mario Maker 2 until Nintendo confirmed at E3 that it was going to be added post-launch. This shows one of two things: that either Nintendo was incredibly stupid and didn't foresee that people wanted to play with their friends online, or what I think is the more likely possibility, that they just didn't finish all the aspects of the online before the game's release, a sign of rushing the game. The second option is much more likely because I believe Nintendo internally is smart enough to realize what fans want. In this modern age of gaming, local play isn't king anymore, it's online play. Many people have friends on the internet and aren't available to play with them in a local space. I do believe that local play is still very important, but online play is important just the same. So I believe that Nintendo was intelligent enough to foresee this desire from their fanbase, but they were probably under too much pressure to rush the release of Mario Maker 2 that they couldn't add this feature in from the very beginning. I don't pretend to be an expert at game development or anything like that, but this could potentially be a feature that takes a decent amount of time to develop into the system. Nintendo would probably want some proper integration with the Nintendo Switch Online app into this, and maybe it took some time to be able to integrate that as well. The good thing about this is that we are eventually getting online with friends post-launch, but I do think that this could potentially be a reason for why Nintendo rushed the release of Mario Maker 2. Another piece of evidence that rushing Mario Maker 2 is that this game tends to have less personality overall than the original Mario Maker. But what do we really mean by that? Well, the original Mario Maker seemed to have such a quirky personality, with a ton of secrets and references hidden throughout it, and the intros of the game included these weird quirks as well. But a lot of this personality has seemingly been stripped away from Mario Maker 2. This could definitely be a design decision to make the game less weird and off-putting to some people, but it also could be due to them not having enough time to add in all of these quirks to the final product, which, because they're kind of unnecessary overall, makes sense to be one of the last things for Nintendo to decide to include. Personally, the weird quirks of the original Mario Maker weren't that big of a deal to me. I enjoyed it mostly as the level creator and playing other people's levels, and all the odd little distractions aren't the biggest deal. But the fact that they're not included, and they were included in the first one, makes me kind of wonder if Mario Maker was rushed and they just didn't have enough time to include all these quirks. Another point that kind of ties into this, another piece of evidence, is that there's no amiibo costumes in Mario Maker 2. The amiibo costumes, for those of you who are unaware and didn't play the original Mario Maker, were very interesting additions because you could scan in your amiibo and allow Mario to transform through the use of the mystery mushroom into the character that you scanned in. But it was really nice because if you didn't own the particular amiibo of the character that you wanted Mario to be, you could still unlock all of the amiibo costumes by playing Mario Maker 2. This was a nice balance because while Nintendo was really trying to push amiibo at the time, you also were not forced to buy these amiibo if you really wanted a certain character. But as I just mentioned, Mario Maker 2 does not contain any of these amiibo costumes. Now this could just be a conscious decision on Nintendo's part to phase out amiibo integration into their games, but I don't believe that argument holds a ton of merit considering that they're still releasing new amiibo relatively frequently. This may just be a case of Nintendo not having enough time to bring over all of the old amiibo costumes and add in new ones for new amiibo in this game. There were a lot of amiibo costumes in Mario Maker, and as I mentioned before, I'm not a big expert in game development, but I'm sure it's not as simple as just copying and pasting them over. You do have to reintegrate them into this game. This one matters a little bit more to me than the odd personality quirks that I was mentioning earlier, because they did allow for a more immersive experience when you tried to create a Zelda level in Mario Maker, for example, and you could have a Link amiibo costume on you. This is not the case anymore, and you will just have to play as a regular version of Mario. The amiibo costumes also provided a bigger incentive to create levels in the original Super Mario Bros. Game style. If you're making a level based on another franchise, you would likely have to do it in the original Super Mario Bros. Style if you want to include the amiibo costume because they were only in that style. Now, at least we don't have to worry about that anymore, but it is kind of a bummer that amiibo costumes aren't included. Another piece of evidence for why Super Mario Maker 2 could have been rushed is that 3D World, that game style, is incompatible with the other themes within the game. As I previously mentioned, the inclusion of a 3D World game theme is one of my favorite additions into Mario Maker 2. However, it comes with the caveat of not being able to transfer your levels from the other 4 themes into it, and vice versa. If you've created a level in the 3D World game theme but decided, I'd rather play this in the Super Mario World game style instead, you're out of luck because you're going to have to completely scrap it and try to rebuild those elements from the ground up in Super Mario World. This decision to make them incompatible with one another could be a conscious one considering that there are so many differences between 3D World and the other styles, but I do believe that many of them could still be converted anyways. Take the Koopa car for example, that could easily be the Yoshi or Karibo shoe equivalent. I believe that many simple workarounds like that could have been able to make them compatible with one another, but Nintendo wasn't able to do this. Sign of evidence, to me at least, that the game was potentially rushed. The final piece of evidence that I want to go over in this video is that there appears to be a second extra game theme, but it's not available at launch. For those of you who are unaware, there's an extra game styles section in Mario Maker 2 that only has 3D World in it, despite being named extra game styles, plural, implying that more than one is planned to be added, and there's also this big space left for one, obviously to be slotted in beside 3D World. So I think it's safe to say that a second theme is going to be coming to Super Mario Maker 2, but is the lack of inclusion of this theme a conscious decision or one because this game was rushed? Why I believe this could be a conscious decision is because this second extra theme could just be saved for a post-launch update like Splatoon did with its content, but it also could just simply not be ready to launch with the game, and that's why it's not being included. Nintendo did release new content post-launch for the original Mario Maker, which could lend credence to the first argument. I did focus on this issue more in-depth in the previous video, which I have a link to on screen right now, if you want to hear more about that. So now that you've listened to all of these pieces of evidence, you probably noticed that for a few of them I said that they could be conscious decisions, but I believe that that itself kind of supports the idea of Mario Maker 2 being rushed, because there are a lot of things that people would think are just design decisions, but at least a couple of them have to be because Mario Maker was rushed, right? The lack of inclusion for a lot of content in Mario Maker 2 can't just all be conscious decisions because a lot of people have been complaining about it. You'd think that if Nintendo wants to make their fan base a little bit happier with this game, they would decide to include a lot of the stuff that appears to be missing. But now, if we do assume that some parts of Mario Maker 2 were rushed, why would this be the case? There are two main reasons that I'm going to be going over now, and the first one is that there are very few big games released in the first half of the year, and there's likely pressure inside of Nintendo to get a big new game release out for fans to have something to buy, as to not be bored with their Nintendo Switch console. It would be a very bad thing for Nintendo if word started spreading even further than it already has about the lack of new games being released for the console, at least in the first half of years. This was a problem last year, and I still think it's a problem this year too. Ports of old games and some minor releases have made up the first half of this year, which quite simply is just not good enough. Nintendo seems to have a ton of content planned for the later part of this year, but for the first half of this year they really dropped the ball. And this could have been a reason for why Nintendo had pressure to release Mario Maker as soon as possible to get something out for people to buy. Another reason for why Nintendo potentially rushed Mario Maker 2 is that they need a big new Mario game this year, but if they were to release it later on this year, it would probably conflict with another game that they're releasing. As I just mentioned, the holiday season for Nintendo this year is packed. and one of those big games that's releasing within it is Luigi's Mansion 3. This is another Mario title that Nintendo's hopefully trying to drive a lot of sales with, as they should expect, considering that Luigi's Mansion hits home with a lot of people. There's a lot of fans requesting for a new one to release on the console, but Mario Maker 2 would definitely reach a lot more people than a new Luigi's Mansion game would. I'm sorry, I think that's just how it is. I believe the demographic who is interested in a new Mario Maker game is probably a lot bigger than a demographic who's interested in a new Luigi's Mansion title. That's not to discredit Luigi's Mansion, they're fun games and all, but I just believe that the potential audience for a new Mario Maker is a lot larger. And Nintendo really likes to have big new Mario games in their release schedule, and New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, while it's selling well, is a Wii U game at its core, and there's a lot of people who've played it on the Wii U that just aren't willing to buy it again on the Nintendo Switch. They're looking for something new, and that's what Mario Maker 2 is likely going to provide. So as to not conflict with the release of Luigi's Mansion 3, Nintendo wanted to release Mario Maker 2 a little bit earlier on in the year. They couldn't just simply delay it till 2020, because that way they wouldn't have this big new mainline Mario title for them to release this year. So with all of this evidence and the reasons being stated, I generally believe that despite how great Mario Maker 2 is in my opinion, I believe it was internally rushed. Now, a lot of the problems that people have with Mario Maker 2 are likely going to be mitigated with these post-launch updates, with all this content that people are expecting to come out post-launch. Although some of the issues that I brought up within this video, such as the amiibo costumes and the lack of personality, probably won't be patched with a future update. I'd really like to know what you think about Mario Maker 2 overall in the comment section down below. If this game was indeed rushed, which I believe it was, does it affect your enjoyment of the game at all? It doesn't affect my enjoyment of the game too much, considering that I'm still really enjoying the game, despite the fact that I believe that it's rushed. So I'm really curious to see what you have to think about this situation. Remember to subscribe and click the bell icon for more content coming your way very soon about Mario Maker 2. And with that all being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.